Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I am Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is the live stream that I do a couple of times weekly where we talk about job search and careers with an emphasis on some of the more stupid and confusing aspects of job search and careers as we encounter them in the real world. Not the theory about how this stuff should work, but the practical aspects of how it does work, with all the ridiculousness and stupidity that goes with that. Fake jobs, ghosting recruiters, just condescending, rude interviewers, all that kind of stuff. This is what we talk about here. The title of this episode is Why Job Interviews Are a Series of Mind-Numbing Contradictions. And this is episode number 65. So we've done 65 of these so far. So welcome. A shout out, as always, goes out to my YouTube channel members. If you are a member of my channel, remember, membership has its privileges. And to my Patreons and to my super thanks donors and to all of you, my participants, you guys are awesome. This is your opportunity to get in the chat. If you should see my face, you should see a chat box somewhere nearby. If you are a subscriber to my channel for any amount of time, get in the chat. Let me know what's up with you, what you're struggling with, what you're wondering about, or you just want to share some kind of thing that happened to you as pertains to job search and interviewing and all this kind of thing. And we'll certainly talk about it. Yeah, I don't have an agenda. I don't have anything to monologue about. I'm purely here responding to your questions. I see that Amazed is here. Amazed says, "Hi all. We are back." Yes, we're back for another round. TGIF, it's Friday. It's not Friday the 13th, so it's not TGIF the 13th, but, similar sentiment. The weekend is coming up. Hopefully, based on your situation, you are in a position to actually take the weekend off, force yourself to do something fun, regardless of how you truly feel, job search, usually when people do it, you feel about this tall. You're at one of the lowest points in your lives, or in your life, I should say. And these kind of times are never easy. It's stressful. You got to endure a lot of rejection. You got to endure a lot of uncertainty or worry about the future. But know this, it's temporary, okay? You are going to come out of this landing on your feet. It's just a question of time. How long? When will it happen? But it will happen. And that's what we're here to talk about. We're here to make sure it does happen for you. So get in the chat. Let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with, and I will do my best to help you out. I see there's 21 people here. Thank you for being here. Let's get into it. Amaze says, how could you tell if an interview went well and if the role would be a good cultural fit? Okay, here's the deal. For most interviews that you go to, you're not going to be able to tell, okay? There are several reasons for this. They usually, if you're dealing with recruiters, they're 9 to 5. Their job is doing job interviews. They've been in a ton of these, and so they're well versed at it. They've rehearsed their lines, for how to end an interview and all this kind of stuff. And they're very practiced. They're very well rehearsed at these kind of things. And they also have a vested interest in not disclosing bad news. Basically, what they do is they try and deliver everything in a very positive way, in theory anyway, and not usually in practice. You get a lot of morons and jackasses out there, but in theory, they try and deliver everything in a very positive way, because if they communicate an aura of optimism and excitement, then people are more inclined to respond and to be forthcoming. So they do this intentionally. Now, the other thing is that the converse is true too. If they indicate that, it went badly, they're not really into you, this kind of thing, No good things usually come from that. Sometimes you get candidates that get upset, and this kind of thing. And nobody really wants to go through that if you don't have to, if you can just sort of pretend like everything is all peaches and cream, and then the person is optimistic and they go away happy, right? So they're really taking that to heart. And if you're feeling that it's not honest, yeah, you're right. I don't think we can entirely blame recruiters for doing this. However, they do cross the line and outright lie when they say, okay, we're going to be contacting you in a week, and we're going to, all this stuff that they may say, and then they don't actually do any of that. That's where they start crossing the line into just being jerks. You know what I mean? But they do not want to divulge their thoughts about how it went. Okay. Now, what you do have a couple of things to go on. The main one is, if you are somewhat emotionally intelligent, that means you can kind of pick up on the other person's body language, the other person's facial expressions, the other person's intonation and tone of voice. If you can pick up on those things, those are probably going to be your best indicator of how it went. But, you have to sort of be tuned in. And for people that aren't, you're maybe like me and you're missing a large chunk of that part of your brain, it's going to require experience. It's going to require a lot of experiences, because the differences in how people behave or what they indicate is very, very subtle, right? There's other more obvious signs. Like, for example, if you get to the end of the interview, and usually they end interviews by asking you if you have any questions back for them, right? The interviewer asks the candidate, do you have any questions for us, right? And everybody, of course, should have questions prepared. If you just say no, that's a very bad sign. They interpret that as a red flag. So you should ask questions. Now, if you ask questions and they give answers, but their answers are kind of short, dismissive, they don't seem to really be interested in talking to you further. They seem like they just want to get you the hell out of the room and have this be over. Obviously, those are signs that it probably didn't go great for them. Okay? Now, I want to reiterate also right now that if it didn't go great for them, that's not a reflection on you. What it simply means is that you're not what they had in mind. Okay? That's the implication. If it's a no, what it means is you're not what they had in mind. They were envisioning somebody else. Okay? Now, is that the same thing as you're no good, or you're unemployable, or you have no value? Of course not. Sometimes they're looking for a candidate that they can exploit, and they can pull the wool over their eyes. And that's not you. You're too smart. You're too tuned into things, too experienced, right? You're not fresh meat. You're not, what do they call it? Fresh fish, or whatever the expression is. You know what I mean? Like, you weren't born yesterday. You're tuned in. And so they see you and they go, no, right? Now, is that a bad thing? In this case, it's a blessing in disguise. Okay. So remember, just because, if they have a negative reaction, you're not what they're looking for, that does not mean that you're no good. A lot of times they're looking for stupid things. They're looking for idiotic things. And if that's not you, oh well, you know what I mean? A lot of times it's a lucky escape. So you just remember that. But hopefully that kind of paints a picture. You'll never really know. And it's not really that critical for you to know, to be honest. The only thing that matters is if it's a yes, they will contact you and it will be obviously a yes. Okay? They will arrange to send over an offer, or they will want to book you for the next interview. I mean, it'll be pretty obvious, right? In the absence of hearing that, you can just assume it's a no. Just assume everything is a no until you hear that, that yes. And actually, it can be pretty damn liberating if you operate like that. Because usually how you're nervous, you're really, really nervous when you go into job interviews, especially when you're young. You've never really done this before. The pressure's on. The stakes are high, and like the fact that you're nervous about it is kind of psyching you out a bit. You don't perform as well as you would. You don't speak as freely as you would. The irony is that, you go to a job interview when you really don't care about it because you honestly feel like this is a little bit beneath me. I don't really need this. I'm probably not going to get it anyway. So you act a little bit more comfortably, more confident, more natural. You're not quite as constricted or nervous. And ironically, you perform better and you can actually get the job. I don't know if there's any statistics on this, but, I would not be surprised to learn that people who they almost like don't care a bit about the interview because they feel I don't need this or this is beneath me or I'm sure this is a no anyway. They actually perform better on the interview than when they're like, the opposite of that, when they're like really nervous and they're really like, I got to get this right. I got to get this right. It would not surprise me to learn that. So that's what I'd say about that in terms of determining, they don't want you to know, and they'll do their best to obfuscate that from you. The last thing they want in an interview is a candidate that has received the message, oh, so it's a no then. You didn't pick me? Well, damn it, why not? And then you get into that conversation, Maybe somebody gets upset. It's awkward. It's tense. That's the last thing they want. So they don't want to say either way. And a lot of the times they honestly don't know, because if there's more than one decision maker, which there usually is, usually there's a hiring manager and a recruiter involved in the process, they have to confer. They have to talk amongst themselves afterwards. What did you think of that candidate? Oh, I don't know. What did you think? They have to have that conversation to know for sure, right? So they honestly may not know. So your efforts to read their body language and pick up on subtle signs, it may be for naught because they're undecided at that point. So that's what's going on when it comes to that stuff. Hopefully that makes sense. Great question, Amazed. I'm going to reduce the brightness of my camera here because on partly cloudy days in my office, it gets bright and it gets dull. It gets bright, it gets dull. So I don't have cameras that automatically adjust for that in a proper way. They do, but they look like crap. So I take it off that auto setting. There we go. So get in the chat. There are 32 people here. Let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with. The title of this episode was Why Job Interviews Are a Series of Mind-Numbing Contradictions. Okay, there's going to be a lot of things with the formal official hiring process, what I call the standard process, that are not going to make sense to you. There are tons of these. For example, years of experience is a standard metric, right? That your recruiters love. And we know that they love this metric beyond all common sense. They determine that if someone has been in a role longer than someone else, then that first person should be better at the role than the second person. That's far from consistently true. We all know this, right? But they place value on years of experience. But then you encounter the idea of being overqualified. I'm sorry, you're old. You have too many years of experience. So therefore, no dice, right? So it's like a contradiction. Either experience is good or it's bad. I mean, you're giving mixed signals, right? You're employing this selectively. It's hard to understand the rules of this game, right? So that's one example of a contradiction. There's many, many examples of this. If you can think of any other examples of contradictions in this process, in their requirements, in the way they treat you, let me know. Put them in the chat. There's a ton of these. You know what I mean? Like another common one that everybody talks about. I'm sure you guys have seen this, where they advertise in a job posting. They'll say it's an entry-level job, right? But then what usually accompanies that? They say, oh, but you need 5 years experience, right? Well, how can it be an entry-level job if you need 5 years experience? That's a total contradiction. That doesn't make any sense. The answer, of course, is that it is not, in fact, an entry-level job. It's simply a worker-level job, and it's not entry-level in any way. You know, they're calling it an entry-level job, but just calling it that doesn't make it an entry-level job. You know what I mean? Usually there are political things going on why they're calling it that. Maybe they want to anchor you to entry-level compensation or something when you start, and they want a very legally justifiable way of doing that if somebody decides to take them to task on it. Things like this, right? So you end up with this contradiction. And you get a lot of young job seekers, people coming out of school, people that don't really know this world, that take it literally. They read this, it says entry level, but then it says 5 years experience. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. Well, it does. You just have to recognize that it is not an entry level job. They are lying to you, right? It's a very obvious lie, But once you understand what the mechanism is, why they're doing that, then it makes perfect sense, right? There's a ton of these. So if you can think of any other contradictions, put them in the chat. And give me some questions. We got 38 people here. There's 38 people here sitting here watching me not answer any questions because nobody's asking any questions. Get in the chat. And I'll be happy to help you out if I can. I'll do my best to answer. That's what this is for. Yeah, what other contradictions can you think of in the absence of question? You could always write that in there too. In the meantime, check out this course. You want to get hired? You want to do this with me? You want to go deeper with me? This is all my advice to do with getting a job. It'll help you get a job in the posted job market. It'll also help you get a job in the hidden job market. And it will do that, especially if you're an introvert. Okay, it's geared primarily towards introverts. It gears to everybody, but the point is, it's like a way to get into the hidden job market for introverts. So check out that course. There's a link in the description box, and that will help you out. Amazed says, any thoughts on why some recruiters and hiring managers signal virtue, speak out against ghosting, and promote professionalism on LinkedIn, yet often fail to uphold those same standards themselves? I think that recruiters don't have the monopoly on that. I think most human beings, do that. We like to, especially these days, it's really come out to bloom thanks to the rise of social media 15 years ago. People love to find fault in other people, but then don't hold themselves accountable. That's the signature of the world now. At least if it's your view of the world, if you go on social media, you see that happening everywhere you look, right? I'm going to accuse everyone of being intolerant while I myself am demonstrating how intolerant I am, things like this, right? So I would not be surprised to see a lot of recruiters do that. There's a lot of people, virtue signaling, doing that kind of thing. The smart people, in my opinion, just keep quiet about it. What's the point of shouting at the world? You know what I mean? I understand there's a lot of people that maybe when they're young or they're just starting out and they feel powerless and they feel, I can't do anything. So they get online and they start shouting at everybody and finding fault with everybody and, making statements and all this kind of stuff. And it's what's that for? So some people that you don't know that exist virtually might be listening to you when, in reality, they're not. You know what I mean? And it also contradicts a basic tenet of human nature, which is people do not like being told they're wrong. They just don't like it. When someone tells you you're wrong, do you go and you go, they make a good point. Maybe I should reconsider my entire, belief system on this and, take what this person has to say into account. Maybe I am the bad guy. It's like nobody does that. What happens is you hear the suggestion that you might be wrong, and you instantly think, no, absolutely not. You're obviously my enemy. I now hate you, and I'm going to go on the attack. That's the standard human response. It's human nature, right? If you want to influence people, that's the last thing you do. You know what I mean? Or if you want to persuade anyone, that's the last thing you do. This is well known. Like, people have known this for thousands of years. For example, in the military has been an organization that's been around for thousands and thousands of years. And the need to be able to influence people and stuff is very important. It's a matter of life or death in the military. Your ability to survive might be tied to your ability to coordinate yourselves and all pull in the same direction, right? So, the learning on this has been around for a very long time. How do you get 5,000 people to all do the same thing enthusiastically? That's a problem the military solved like thousands of years ago. And we've been studying it and refining it ever since, and sort of chapter 1, paragraph 1 is not to cause division, not to insult people and, convince them that they're wrong, convince them they have no value, and label yourself as their enemy. You know what I mean? So anyway, okay, we got some questions. Thank you. Hopefully this is helpful to people. Okay, so how do you say this? Mushy says, why do companies post they hiring within the company? Okay, I've asked to hire at new position, waiting but never hire from within. I don't know what you mean if they're posting it, but they're hiring from within. It continues. I've been waiting for months to be able to join on as an HVAC, which the company have openings, but I have not been yet considered. Okay, so it sounds like you're referring to fake job postings, or you're referring to a job posting where the company is posting it externally, but yet they are only considering internal candidates. At least that's what I'm interpreting you're saying. Hopefully I got that right. Okay, so here's the deal. In the case of fake jobs where there isn't actually a job, they're not actually hiring, but yet they post a job publicly, there are several reasons for that. One is because the company wants it to look like they're successful and they're growing, okay? Because one of the indicators of a company that's growing is that they're hiring more people. They have the money to spend on more people, and they have the need for more people, okay? That's a standard, well-known thing, okay? Now, it can also signal, if you're just hiring, it could also signal that you can't retain your employees, and you are always having to hire substitute employees because the existing ones keep leaving, right? So what they do is they post certain positions, new positions that didn't exist before. And in theory, that's supposedly something that investors and other like people are looking at. So because they're not inside the company, they don't know what's actually going on. So they're looking at external signs like that, right? Another reason you can get a fake job is because of identity theft. It's actually a scam, and it's somebody that's out there that's trying to get your personal information. So if they send you a form and they say, if you apply for this job, you need to give us your, all your confidential numbers, your passport number, your social security number, social insurance number, date of birth, all that kind of stuff, your email address, your social media accounts, like everything, your credit card number, like, we're going to ask for everything, pay stubs, whatever. And they're going to take this information, and now it's in the hands of scammers, right? That are going to do nefarious things with it. So that's another thing, okay, that does exist. So beware, okay? Now, to the second scenario, where there is a job and they're posting it publicly, but they're not actually considering external candidates. They're only hiring internally, okay? Why are they doing that? It's because, often it's because they really wanted to hire someone internally, but they're being forced to make it appear that they are also considering external candidates for some legal or political reason, okay? So the law might say, say it's a government job, the law in whatever country you're in, it will say you have to do certain things when you hire, and one of those things is you have to consider external candidates. You can't just promote from within all the time. You have to consider who else is out there and are they a viable option. Okay. There's all kinds of reasons why that stuff might be in place. I can't go into all of them, but that's the type of thing that we see. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Mosh. Amaze says, by the way, I'm amazed, a gentleman, a learner and fan of your educational content. Well, thank you. Thank you, Amaze. That's high praise indeed, and I appreciate it. And I'm delighted that you think that highly of me. So that's great. And I think it's great that you're here. You know, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have had any comments in the chat for another several minutes. So that's great. Billy H says, I find it frustrating in interviews where the interviewer expects you to be very enthusiastic when they haven't given you much information on the team/role. Any strategies for seeming more interested? Yeah, it's called a rehearsal. You basically have to fake it. Listen, a moment ago I was talking about human nature and how people, one aspect is people don't like being told when they're wrong, right? Now, a very closely related principle is this, right? People respond positively or more positively to positive people, right? So if somebody comes up to you and they're very enthusiastic about, meeting you or hearing about an opportunity or whatever, you're going to feel a lot more positive about them, right? So it's not that the recruiter expects it of you. It's that you actually improve your odds if you come across as genuinely interested and excited even, showing some passion, showing some enthusiasm. They're going to, just as human beings, they're going to want to respond more positively to you. Okay? Now, I know what you're talking about because a lot of recruiters, there's some good ones out there, but there's a hell of a lot of bad ones. And a lot of them, something I've noticed over the course of my life, a lot of these people are just not suited to interacting with other people. But yet, they're in a job where they have to interact with other people all day long, and they're in a position of power. They're in a position of privilege where they're the gatekeeper for a job, and you're a job seeker. And you basically have to go cap in hand on your knees to these people, Now, instead of handling that appropriately, okay, by being very gracious and being very respectful, and all this kind of thing, right? Being a decent human being. A lot of them, unfortunately, don't. I'll say it, they abuse their position to be grossly incompetent. They consciously are aware of the fact, or maybe unaware of it, blissfully ignorant of the fact that most people are not going to call them on it because they're trying to be ingratiating. They're trying to get something from you. So they're not going to call you on the fact that you're being completely incompetent. Or they're not going to call you on the fact that you're being rude or disrespectful. Right? This kind of thing. And that's well known. Now, a lot of these people are just ignorant. They don't recognize that they're incompetent or they're being rude. It's unintentional, and you have to endure this. Others, they're fully aware of it and they enjoy the power, the personal power trip that comes with that, and it's very unfortunate. So it's just the reality of this. If you want something from them, you have to play by their rules. You have to endure their process, their way of communicating with you, right? It's frustrating as hell, and I empathize completely. In the first half of my career, I had to deal with that kind of crap. And I thank my lucky stars that I don't have to deal with that anymore. God willing. But, yeah, I know it's these people abuse their privilege, they really do. Maybe a lot of them are just bitter about being in that job. Maybe they fell into that job. It's not what they wanted to do. And they're taking it out on every person that they have to, encounter along the way. I think that I would not be surprised to learn that's pretty common. Billy continues, I'm probably referring a little bit to recruiters and others that reach out and want to know your full history before even telling you what the job is. Yeah, well, listen, what they're going to do, listen, they act like all business. They act purely in their self-interest, right? One would think that they would view the relationship more as a partnership, right? We want you to join our team. We want you on board, as an equal or, in some way. So we're going to treat you like an equal. We're going to treat you like a partner from the outset. One would think that that's how they would operate. And sometimes they do. But in a lot of situations, they don't. Instead, they revert to, the pure sort of, not pure, I was going to say pure business reasoning, but it isn't. It isn't good business reasoning. It's this dumbed down, basic 101 version of pure business reasoning, which is, I'm going to act entirely in my self-interest. I'm going to totally piss you off. I'm going to, give the impression of being a person you do not want to work with. And I'm going to take every advantage I possibly can get, right? And we see that in the official hiring process in many, many ways, right? They want you to do all the work. They want you to reveal all your secrets, like every single thing, all your personal information, all the real personal stuff that's confidential. They want to know all of it, right? But yet, they're not going to respond in kind. They're going to obfuscate everything from you. It's going to be an asymmetric relationship, put it that way. Okay, this is common. This is how they operate. And they're going to push for it. And you know why they're pushing for it? It's because it works. It's because most people give them exactly what they're looking for, right? So most people will just tell them everything and not complain, right? Now, the problem is that you're scared of sort of pushing back because you feel that, if I say no, if I say, look, okay, I'm sorry, I have a policy of not revealing that to people until I have an offer in my hand. That's just how I operate. That's confidential information. Identity theft is real. I just have a policy of not doing this. I'm sure you understand. You guys have corporate policies on divulging, company information. Well, so you understand exactly what I'm talking about, right? And you're afraid to do this because you figure that, okay, if I do that, they're just going to say, okay, well, we're just going to move on with somebody else, right? And so they, it's called the prisoner dilemma. They take advantage of this, right? They play one candidate against each other, and it's a well-known thing, right? The answer, of course, is to go around all this corporate horseshit, and pardon my French, and get a job through networking, because that's far more effective. You don't have to do any of this crap. Or you just move on to a different company, right? And with a little bit of experience, you'll eventually learn where that line in the sand is drawn between what's reasonable and what's unreasonable. Okay? It's very hard for younger people who have hardly done this before to really know how far they can push with these inappropriate requests. You know what I mean? Mosh says correct. Okay, good. Dave Popovic says, when interviewing with recruiters for technical roles, I find it challenging to determine whether or not they clearly understand the technical responses. I feel this may impact the interview outcome. Oh, absolutely. You see, recruiter, the job title of recruiter is, first of all, it's an entry-level job. Okay. I mean, you can move up, you can have senior recruiters and executive recruiters, but recruiter is an entry-level job. Most recruiters that work as a recruiter, they are entry-level employees. And what training they have is in the HR area. So they understand employment standards, labor laws, hiring practices, things like this, human rights laws and legal things, harassment laws, like that's what they are trained in. Okay. So if they're hiring you for a technical position, let's say you're an electrician or a mechanic or, a developer, you write code, or any other type of technical role. You're a technician, you're an engineer, whatever. They know absolutely nothing about technology or engineering or skill trades. Like they know nothing about that stuff. Okay, so it's dumb because if they're put in a position where they're the ones asking you the technical questions, they have no idea whether your answer makes sense or not. What they're looking for in those situations is, do you hesitate? Like, do you not know? You go, I don't know. It could be this, right? You don't need to be a technical expert to know that this person probably doesn't know what they're talking about, right? You know what I mean? And then you get the pseudo-technical questions. Like they'll ask you estimation questions. They'll say, how many golf balls can fit in this room? Give me an answer, And like, or, what does the Statue of Liberty weigh? Or, like those kind of questions. How tall, what's the volume of the all the steel in the Eiffel Tower or something? They'll ask you these questions, these pseudo-technical questions, where they think that that's like sign of someone's technical chops if you can answer that. And really, all you have to do to answer those questions is you have to do some extremely basic estimation calculations. You say like, well, okay, a golf ball, let's say this room is, 10 feet by 9 feet by 12 feet. So that's a total volume of X. And in 1 cubic foot, you can fit approximately, 100 golf balls. Therefore, 100 times the volume is approximately this many golf balls. There you go. They go, okay, well then you're a good engineer. Like it's stupid, These like pseudo-technical questions that they have recruiters ask, a lot of those are just idiotic. They're mind-numbingly idiotic. The only reason why they're hard is because you have no idea like what factor they're really trying to get from you. If you were to know it's an estimation question, it would be child's play. But it sounds like they're asking you to just know the exact value off the top of your head. Now, if you hadn't prepared for a job interview and gone online and said, what are the types of questions I could be asked, you wouldn't be able to answer it. It just shows you how these questions are failures at truly being able to separate good candidates from bad candidates, So I sympathize with your frustrations because it's a ridiculous process, right? Dave, you're not insane. You're not alone in wondering this stuff because it's widespread, Alex says quite a lot here. Let's see. Today was induction course about the company, and in 5 and 6 May training days, and the following days I'll be integrated into a team. Okay, transport graphics. We are lucky. The company offers chances to grow. Is there a question? But the salary team will be worth it. Okay, I don't see a question anywhere in there. Mosh says, I work internationally at the company. Okay. Billy H says, thank you for your comments about recruiters not acting like this is a partnership to build a team and affirming how I feel about this. Yeah, you're not insane, Billy H, and you're not alone. These are common things that we see, right? And it's caused by the recruitment and selection function in the HR department in a lot of large companies. It's caused by them being put on a budget, right? So they get entry-level employees to handle this. It's very much a paint-by-numbers thing. And the only way it sort of starts to make sense is when you realize that they're not actually looking for the most qualified candidate. They're not. They don't care about which candidate of all these ones is the most qualified. What they're looking for is they're looking for the least risky candidate, right? So a lot of their questions in job interviews, they center around, are there any red flags in your past, or are there any red flags about you, like in terms of your personality or anything like that, right? That's what they're really looking for, you know. So for example, you know, you might be technically qualified to do the job. You might be much more technically qualified than the next candidate, but they ask you a question like, you know, what's your weakness? And you say, oh, well, I've got a terrible temper. And they go, oh, okay. And then they think, okay, well, that's a risk factor. You know, yeah, you're qualified, but, you know, this could be a reason why you don't work out. So therefore, we're gonna label you as a high risk candidate, right? Whereas the other candidate, who is nowhere nearly as qualified as you, they have less experience, less education, less skills, right? When asked the what is your weakness question, they say something like, well, you know, I do very good quality work, but I'm not always the first person to be done. So I guess that's my weakness. I'm not the first one finished all the time. You know, I'm consistently one of the last people to finish, but I do good work. You know, they go, okay, well, that's not really a weakness. That's just a consequence of, you know, doing a good job. You know, you spend a little more time with it. So I don't see any risk factors. So you're not a high risk candidate. So we should go with that person, right? That's kind of how their thought process work on it. So you might think that they're actually looking for the most qualified person. They're not. You know, if you are invited for a job interview, that means that in their eyes, on paper, you are qualified. So that's no longer really a concern that they're looking into. The only way that could be a concern from now on is if it turns out that you falsified something you said in your application. You said you had a degree in this when you didn't, or something. You know what I mean? Like, that's the only way that it could turn out that you might not be qualified enough, and that's why they eliminate you. Everything from this point on is really about what are those risk factors? Have you ever quit a job? Oh, you quit your last job. Okay. Well, but we don't know you, but that certainly signals that you're the type of person that quits jobs. Oh, I don't know. That could be a red flag. That could make you a high risk employee. If you've quit jobs in the past, maybe if we hire you, you'll quit this job. You know, as opposed to someone who has never quit a job in their lives, they're less likely to quit this job, right? So you appear more risky than they do, right? So that's what they care about. It's all about, like, they're looking for risk factors. They're looking for not qualifications, not experience. It's deceptive because a lot of job interview questions, they ask you about qualifications, but that's not really what they care about. And if you've ever wondered, like someone did here, why they get entry-level HR people to ask you technical questions about something when they clearly don't understand any of the technicalities of what you do and what you're talking about. This is why, because they don't really care about the technicalities of, you know, these questions. They care about looking for risk factors, right? And that's more of the sort of, you know, you have to be more of a psychologist than an engineer to tune into that stuff. Hopefully that makes sense. But I'm glad you're on the right. You're sort of looking at it the same way I do, Billy H. You're not alone in that. Alex says, I was only saying I'm enthusiastic about the company. Okay, that's good. That's good, Alex. You know, it's good to be, into a job prospect, right? That's great. You know, and a lot of other people are going to be where you are right now when some of this stuff starts working out, you know, which will be very soon. Carlos says, I accepted an offer and have a pending starting date. Just received another offer for a better position and 35% better pay. Well, I know what I'd do, Carlos. How could I turn down the offer I accepted? Okay, so let me just get this straight, okay? You accepted an offer, okay, and you haven't started with that company. Let's call them Company A, okay? In the meantime, you then received an offer from Company B. Now, you haven't accepted it yet. What I would do is, first of all, I wouldn't do anything until you accept the offer, if you haven't already done so, and received their written acknowledgement of this with a firm start date. Okay? Now, here's the deal. You don't have any loyalty to company A. Okay? It may feel like you do, but you don't. Okay? When you signed that agreement, you fully intended to honor it, right? But things change. Things can change all the time, right? In which case, it requires a readjustment. Now, what the professional thing to do is not to call up company A and just say, like, nope, I'm terminating this agreement. I'm not taking the job. What would be the professional thing to do would be to give them an opportunity to match your offer from company B. So if you're getting paid 35% more, and did you say that you enjoyed that job more or anything like that? It's a better position. So maybe there's other intangible factors, like you would rather do that job and things like this. So that would require a premium, maybe another 5%, 10% more. Okay. So the way you would handle it professionally is you contact, first of all, you make sure you get company B's offer in the bag. It's all signed, sealed, and delivered. And you've checked out their reputation. They're not some fly-by-night operation that's going to pull a fast one on you and rescind the job offer, or have you start and then let you go a week later. You know what I mean? Like, you've checked out the operation. It doesn't look risky. You've done your due diligence, right? So assuming you've done all that, then you go back to company A and you say, listen, here's the thing. I'm very excited about working for you guys. I'm very grateful that you decided to take a chance on me, and I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to a very long and fruitful partnership with you. Okay. However, here's the thing. There's been a development. I've received another offer for, let's say, 50% more pay. Okay. Whatever it is, 45 when you add up that premium that you need. Okay. Now I've just received this. Okay. Can you match it? Because I would prefer to work for you guys. But as you can understand, I have a family to feed. I have to follow the money. Okay. So I'm giving you the opportunity. I'm not saying, screw you, I'm out of here and pulling a fast one. I'm being very professional. I'm saying, look, here's the deal. Here's my problem. Now I would like to work with you. I'm excited to do it. I have every intention of doing it. Can you match it? I'm giving you the opportunity to do this. And I need to know by this date. I'll just make up a date. Give them like 4 days or something. Just make it up. Okay. In reality, you don't need anything from these people. Okay. You just want to make sure they're not going to take 6 months to decide. Right. Okay. So in the meantime, you proceed forward, full speed ahead with company B with this better offer. Okay. If they want you to start, you start. Okay. Just get that job in the bag. Don't, go back to them and say, I'm having second thoughts. None of that. Proceed full speed ahead with company B. Okay. In all likelihood, company A is not going to be able to do anything. They're not going to be able to match the offer. Make sure you don't give any information to company A about this offer you've received from company B. You do not want them knowing the specifics. You don't want them knowing the company or the person you're working with or anything. All they need to know is that you've received an offer and you need this premium. You need another 50% more, whatever it is. Okay. That's the only thing that's relevant. Okay. And then whichever way this works out, you're going to come out on top. You're going to take the job for company B. The only reason you're doing this is that let's pretend that company A could match the offer and even give you a premium. Then that would be worth something for you, to you. Okay. So that's the only thing you're doing here. You're not burning any bridges. You're not pissing anyone off. Wouldn't it be great if you could come back to company A after turning down their job offer? They still want you. They still like you. Maybe company B, it doesn't work out. And in a year's time, you're back on the job market. You don't know what the future holds. Wouldn't it be nice to come back to company A and say, hey, you guys offered me a job last year. I'd still love to work for you guys. Are there any opportunities here? I've become available. And they'll be like, yes, you're right. We had a great relationship. I remember you. Yeah, let's pick up where we left off. Okay, so that would be my advice. I would handle it something like that, depending on your your personal situation. Amaze says, great point, Bill. I've noticed some hiring managers react strongly when I mentioned that I resigned from a role, even when I had valid reasons. It seems that can sometimes be perceived as wrong. Absolutely, it can. Yeah, if you've walked away from something, somebody gave you a chance, and you decided for whatever reason, no, I'm not going to do this. I know I said I did, but I'm not going to. I'm leaving. Goodbye. Right? The problem is when you do that, and the way job interviews work, you see, the recruiter and the hiring manager, they don't know you, okay? So they're painting a picture of you based on what few things you tell them, right? Now, if you tell them that, oh yeah, I was given this chance, I was given this job, this role, and after 6 months, I decided to leave. I said, no, and then I left, right? What are they going to conclude? Well, they're going to conclude that you're the type of person that resigns from things, right? That's the impression you're making. So they're going to ask you questions in the job interview to get you to reveal stuff like this. They might even say, have you ever resigned from a job? Right? So you're put on the spot, and it's a trap, of course, because if you say, yes, since you asked, yes, I did do that once, and then you tell them all about it, now they're going to label you as, oh, okay, red flag, you're the type of candidate that resigns from things. So if we were to hire you, there's a high likelihood that you would resign from this job as soon as it got a little challenging, or it was not to your liking. And that means you're a high-risk employee or a high-risk candidate. So we don't want to hire you, right? So yeah, when they ask you stuff like that, you wriggle out of it. You know what I mean? That's the deal. Just like when they say, like, what are your weaknesses? You have to give them something. And you really got to tread carefully, because if you give them something that they think, well, that could happen again here, in which case you would have a problem, that means you'd be a high-risk employee, right? So that's what these exchanges are all about, right? Don't reveal anything negative about yourself, and don't say anything negative about anyone else in a job interview. It's just bad news. This thing moved on me. So where was I here? Thank you for comments about recruiters acting partnership. Okay, we did that. Carlos, amazed. I was amazed. Okay. Okay, someone says, hey, just want to thank you one more time. The first interview I used your advice, I got the offer. I've been working in the company for a month so far and absolutely love it. Well, congratulations. I'm glad to hear that worked out. And thank you for telling me and for saying such nice things. So that's great. Enjoy your role. And it's entirely due to your own doing. I had nothing to do with it. You are a highly employable person. You're highly valuable. And, this just proves it, so way to go. Dave says the criteria for risk seems to be somewhat arbitrary to a certain. Of course it is. Yeah. You see, the thing is, it's hard to spot talent. Like I've said this many times, in every industry where you have to spot talent, it's extremely hard. Like it's hard, for the smartest people in the world. You know what I mean? Like the most well-equipped people in the world, they find this a real challenge, right? My favorite examples of this was, like I said in the video a long time ago, where it was the music group, like the Beatles, right? The best-selling artist of all time, right? In terms of like album sales or whatever, they've sold like 1 billion records or whatever it is. There's to this day they still hold the record, and when they were just starting out and they were looking around for a company that would give them a record deal or whatever, or would work with them, they did this audition that was recorded at, whatever. And, the audition has been released, that's how famous and in demand this artist is. Right. But they did this audition, and they were turned down by the talent scout, by the person whose job it was, like essentially the recruiter, the person whose job it was to audition talent and decide, who should we make a deal with and stuff like this. Who could we make money off, basically, right? And they were turned down. They were said, nope, we're not going to work with you. And the explanation was guitar groups are on the way out, and that goes down in the history books as the wrongest person in the history of the entire human race, who rejected the Beatles on the basis that nobody is ever going to like rock music. You know what I mean? And instead they hired, there was more to the story. Instead they hired, they signed another band who lived like a block away from the studio. And that was the criteria that was used. Oh, you guys, you live just over there? Okay. They're not sparing expenses. They're hiring the best people around to make these decisions, right? What we see in corporate recruitment, in job search, is they're trying to spot talent, technically, but they're trying to do it on a budget with entry-level employees. So you can imagine how accurate this is and how well it works out, right? That's one of the reasons why, if you look at employee retention rates over the last 50 years, they've been going steadily down, right? They're letting more people go. More people are not working out. And yeah, it starts with hiring the wrong people to begin with. They're not suited to this. And then you don't use them properly, but that's a whole other thing. Right? So it's a sort of colorful and rich tapestry of different people we have in this game doing an absolutely terrible job. So it's totally arbitrary because you don't really have any real brains or skill behind it. Alexa Kent says it's easy to figure out talent. Look at someone's birth chart and how current transits affect the birth chart. Yeah, whether Mars is in the house of the ram or six chickens lay addled eggs before breakfast and all this kind of thing, right? And there you go. Look at their this line here and that line there, and draw some triangles, and there you go. It's child's play. In fact, they should start teaching that in corporate recruitment. Alex says, just an affirmation for me. Today we were candidates for a recruiting company and other candidates. There's only one trainer from the second company who trained us. Okay, good. Primarily cause only 2 recruiting companies to recruit for this electronic. Okay, cool. Good stuff. Well, I'm glad it's working out. Yes, so there's 52 people here. Thank you for joining me on a Friday here. If you're wondering anything or you're struggling with anything to do with job search or careers, let me know. I've been doing a lot of bitching on this live stream. I don't know if it's all that helpful, but if you do have questions, let me know and I'll do my best to help you out. That's what this is for. While we're waiting for some questions, check out that course. Okay, if you want to figure out what you're doing, you just don't know where to start. Hiring is confusing. You don't know what you're supposed to be doing. You don't know what you're doing wrong. You just want a good overview. This is where I put all my advice on how to get a job. It'll teach you how to do 2 things. It'll teach you how to get a job in the posted job market. It'll teach you also how to get a job in the hidden job market. That's where everybody should be looking. Hidden job market is where it's at. Number 1, that's where all the best jobs are. Number 2, there's considerably more jobs in the hidden job market than in the posted job market. And number 3, you have substantially less competition for these jobs than in the posted job market. Okay, so I don't know if you can see my big fat fingers there, but 3 points, 3 advantages that it has over the posted job market. Okay, now if you're an introvert, fret not, because my course is tailored to you. I myself am a technical introvert. Okay, I have been my whole life. And I demonstrate a type of networking that is tailored to introverts, because you do the vast majority of it on the computer, on social networking. And then you only go and talk to people. First of all, you don't have to go and talk to people face to face at all. But if you choose to do informational interviews and things like this, you only end up talking to those people when they invite you down. They say, we want to talk to you. Just like a referral, not like a job interview. You don't have to force yourself on anybody. It's just easy. You find the people that are looking for someone like you. When they invite you down, then you go down to talk to them. And I myself have done this. I built a consulting business by doing these exact techniques. And I did a lot of informational interviews with CEOs and things like this, where they invite you down and you spend a couple hours with them. And it's really, really cool. You know, people really want to talk to you. Completely different than a job interview. Job interview, you're treated like cattle. You know, you're treated like a number. They actually don't want to talk to you. If they could get you out of there sooner, they would, right? That's why we're seeing some of the trends we're seeing these days in the official hiring processes, where they're trying to go to things like, first of all, doing remote interviews is not good enough. They want to go a step further to where you record a video of yourself talking and answering questions, you know, and then they can start watching the video and they get a few seconds in, they can make a determination. I don't like this. So they just don't watch the rest of the video. You know, it's even more self-serving, right? They treat you even more like a number. So, you know what I mean? If you are looking to break into the hidden job market, I can help you with that. I fully advocate for this. Anyway, okay, so where do we leave off here? Some dude is here. Right on. I love that handle. Some dude says, would you recommend going to coding meetings to network? No luck on job boards so far. Coding meetups? I'm like, there was a website called meetup.com. Is that what you're referring to? I know I wouldn't. Well, look, in the absence of anything else, it's better than nothing, right? But no, that's not what I would suggest. Like, who are you trying to meet is the question. Because it seems like just from this one sentence you've written, a coding meetup, isn't that where like coders go? Is that who you're hoping to meet with? I would have thought if you're looking for a job, depending on what your goals are, you would want to talk to a hiring manager, someone who's a boss, who's in the business of hiring coders, not the coders themselves, right? They'd be like your coworkers, right? So no, that would not be the approach that I'd recommend. It's not stupid, but it's just, I think there are a lot better things than something like that. Darnell says, thanks. Your videos have helped. Any specific tips for managers of managers in the context of org design? What's org design? If you could just answer that for me, please. I'll be happy to help you. LHDZ says, how do you warm up a panel? Recently went to an interview and 3 people sat across from me. I felt they were staring at me. Oh, they probably will be. Yeah. And you stare right back. You remember you look people right in the eyes, you know, right? And, you know, you're going to be looking at one person and then another, right? As you answer, right? And, you know, that's perfectly fine unless they got the Hulk Hogan eyes, right? You know, unless they're like kind of like this, I'm going to be there, I'm going to be waiting in the room, you know, that kind of stuff, right? They look like wild-eyed and crazy. If it's that kind of staring, then that could be a red flag. But otherwise, they're going to be looking at you. And to answer your question, how do you warm up a panel, right? The way it normally works, like if it's a physical meeting, it's not a virtual thing. You walk into the room, you're going to shake everyone's hand, usually. There's some cultural things that happen around the world, but usually you're going to shake everyone's hand. You're going to say, hello, you know, it's very good to meet you, you know, right? And what's a good thing is, ideally, in a perfect world, you have made up your own business card. You know, the header of your LinkedIn profile, like all that information, it's got a picture, it's got a tagline, it's got your name, it's got your contact information, your phone number, your email address, and all that kind of stuff. You just put that on a business card, right? I mean, it costs like $20 literally to like print up a whole stack of these. The place I used to use for this in the past was a place called Vistaprint. You can order them online, right? You do it all online and they just send it to you. Anyway, so ideally, if you have your own business card, what you can do is you can just sort of like, that's a cue. You meet them, you shake hands. Hey, it's very good to meet you. Yeah. And then you take out your business card, you give it to them. And that's a cue for them to take out their business card, because if they're working in a company, they'll probably have a company card of some kind, even in this day and age, and they'll give that to you. And then you know exactly who the hell you're talking to, right? You know their name and you know who they are. Like, is this the HR person? Is this the CEO? Is this the hiring manager? Like, who is this person, right? So that kind of helps, right? Because if you're like me, you can't retain this in your head, especially when you get introduced to like 4 people at once. Some people, they're very good at this. They do the right thing, which is they remember everyone's name and they memorize who they are. They retain that. Very hard when you're nervous, and it's very hard to do for some people at the best of times, like me. So I like to get their business card. Okay. Then before the interview really starts, sometimes people just want to get down to business, and you can't really have like any chit chat or anything like that. They basically determine what the protocol is. You know what I mean? Usually it's a good thing to say, thank you very much for having me down here. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I'm very excited to hear what you guys have to say about this position. It's a pretty intriguing position, and they may say, thank you. And, or they may like pick up on that and ask you questions and, oh yeah, what did you find fascinating about it? It's like, oh, I found fascinating, this combination of skills. And I know you guys do work in this area, blah, blah, blah. You could have a conversation like that, right? At the beginning. That kind of warms it up a bit, right? Okay. But if they say like, okay, let's get down to it. And you say, yes, of course, right. Straight to business, let's get down to brass tacks. Now if you smile and they don't reciprocate, they're kind of like, there's not much you can do about that. Listen, you try and be social, to a professional degree. You don't like waste everyone's time telling stories or whatever, but just a little bit of warmness is good in professional circles. If you can do something like that, that's great. If they don't respond, that's their problem. They're probably miserable people that hate their job and want to go jump off a bridge. That's on them. That's their affair, right? But you're doing everything properly and you're being pleasant, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's nothing inappropriate about that. That's how this is done, right? Okay, so I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's kind of what you do. You know what I mean? That's a typical situation. And then when they start asking questions, you just launch into it. So the first question will be some version of tell me about yourself, and then you just go from there. And one last thing, when you sit there and you got 3 people across the table from you, or even 4 people, whatever, as you answer, what's good is if you got the business cards, put them on the table in front of you in a line, like lined up to the people, right? So if you forget this person's name, you can just glance at the card. Oh yeah, okay, Betty, and then this person says something. It's like they say something. Yes, you're absolutely right, John. Because you have the card right there, right? So it just helps if you put those on the table. Okay, and you're going to be looking at them. Usually the person who asks the question, you're going to make eye contact with them most of the time. You don't just hold their like a stare for the entire time, but you can glance around or glance down or whatever, but basically you're talking to the person who asked the question. Okay, Alex says, in the last days before the job, only one from Hidden Job Market from LinkedIn says to me that there are no job posts yet. I have a premium, but I will close it. Okay. Yeah, this is not about job posts. It's that either you went to the wrong person or they just don't get it, in which case it's fine. You just move on to the next target. Okay. You're going to be contacting a lot of people, right? So this person doesn't get it. Oh, well, just like how many job postings do you respond to with an application where you never hear anything from them? It's like, oh, well, you just keep moving. Amaze says, how does one strike a balance between overall job satisfaction and compensation? Often the most fulfilling workplaces don't offer the desired salary, which can ultimately lead to eventual departures. Yeah, it's a fine line, isn't it, Amazed? And that's highly dependent on each person, right? Everyone's going to have their own goals and their own tolerances, right? There's some people that do both extremes, right? On one end, someone might get like a very pleasant job where it's all smiles and chuckles. You could even have like charity type stuff where it's volunteering, where, you know, for a lot of businesses could learn things from volunteer organizations, because for someone to show up every day to work, and they can work like 9 to 5 at a volunteer organization for practically no money at all, right? You have to make them want to show up every day, right? The moment they start not wanting to show up, it's over. They don't. You know what I mean? So a lot of those organizations have really perfected, you know, making a person want to show up. Something that a lot of businesses could lessons they could really incorporate. You know, you'd have more people wanting to do the job and staying despite low compensation and other factors. You know what I mean? You know, now where that question moved on me. So what was the question? Okay, so the balance between satisfaction and compensation, and yeah, you get people to do the opposite. The people that go and like I'm in Canada, and Canada's all about natural resources. So we have a lot of mining operations up north, and you get people that, like, if you want to, it's almost like working on an oil rig. You know, like you want to make a lot of money. Maybe when you're young, you want to make a lot of money in a few years. You know, in a very short space of time. You can go work down the mines. You know, you move to a place where nobody is, and you've got this like industrial town, and you're working with a bunch of miners, you know, out in the middle of nowhere. It's not fun. You know, there's nothing to do. You're working long hours, you know, shift work, holidays, you know, you name it, right? And it sucks. And it's a very tough environment, but you're making a killing, you know what I mean? And some people will just do that for a few years and then move back to like a city and try and start a family and have a more normal life, you know? So you get both extremes, right? Now, is that for everyone? Of course not. It depends on your personal goals, your you know, what you're looking for, right? But yeah, they tend to contradict. Like the more money you get, the less pleasant it is, and vice versa, right? That's the rule. So where you are on that trade-off is going to be entirely up to you. There is no right or wrong answer. It's just what's right for you. Now, if you don't know, you might want to pursue some of these jobs just to see, just to stick your toe in the water and see, you know, what it's all about. Especially if you're young, you're single, you don't have a family or any kind of responsibilities like that. That might be a perfect time to investigate it if you do your research properly and you know what you're getting into. Alex says, it's good that 2 answered, but still they reach out. It takes more time. Okay. Some dude says, thank you. You're welcome. Emmy Lizeth said, as of lately, it feels as though employers are looking to pin you in negative things in interviews. That's not something that's happening lately. It's always kind of been like that. They're just doing it with less and less social skills, put it that way. Darnell says org design is in team structure. Who reports to whom? Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that was a thing. I just thought that was a thing that managers just did as part of their job. But okay. Any specific tips for managers in the context of org design? Well, yeah, there's a lot of skill and a lot of detail that goes into that. I mean, it's highly dependent on the work functions and the demands of those roles. So, I mean, it's not something I can summarize in a couple minutes, especially when I don't know any of the particulars of the industry you're in or anything like that. One thing I'll say that I can say, it's a self-contained thing, is that you have to be able to distinguish. Like, listen, I don't know what level you're at or what we're talking about here, so I'm just going to talk in generalities. You need to be able to distinguish if a department is a cost center or it's a strategic resource. You really have to do that, because a common blunder that I've seen, and it may not always be a blunder, but it's usually a blunder, is they put the IT organization, they have them report to the CFO, and that pretty much guarantees that IT will be seen as a cost that needs to be reduced, as opposed to a strategic resource that can greatly enhance your business. You know what I mean? Like when you put anything that reports to the CFO, anything that's in the sort of financial and accounting, org, it's going to be viewed like that. It's going to be viewed the way an accountant scrutinizes things. We have to reduce this cost. We have to reduce this cost, right? Same thing if you put safety or quality or environmental or like any of those things, you put them under the CFO, that pretty much guarantees that they will not be a strategic resource. Other things like the things I just mentioned, whether it's IT, quality, safety, environmental, any of the services, depending on the nature of your business or your industry, they could be either a strategic resource that can really give you a competitive edge in many different ways, in terms of like the marketing and the perception of the company, or in terms of its intrinsic value in operations, whatever we're talking about here, right? Those can really enhance you and give you the keys to the kingdom to gain more market share than any of your competitors and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? But the problem is that if you have them run by an accountant, right? All the accountant will want to do is try and get them to just minimize that cost. They can't ever go above and beyond. We'll never be considering what they could do for the organization. It's always a matter of doing the bare minimum as cheaply as possible. And that's just, you're giving up such considerable strategic advantages when you organize yourself like that. You know what I mean? It almost permanently hamstrings you as a organization. So, I mean, but once again, that's like a generality. There's like so many specifics about this stuff. You can't really talk about it in generalities. Anyway, that's not really what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about job search and, careers and that kind of stuff. So I do a live stream on Mondays about small business, and I do a live stream earlier on Fridays about big business. Maybe if you join one of those, we could get into it if you want, because that's kind of more my core competency. Okay, where did I leave off here? Did that one. Okay, did Emmy Lizeth. Let's see, organize design. Okay, you're welcome, LHDZ, or DZ, as you might say, depending on where you're from. Dave says, I applied for a role over a month ago and reached out to the hiring manager with a brief introduction. I just received a DM from letting me know their HR wants to arrange an interview. Okay, well, that could go both ways. I would take it. I'd pursue it. Usually, the whole point of doing the direct outreach thing, if that's what you did, is to talk to them independent of the HR organization. Usually, that's something you can achieve if you're talking to executives. If you're going to like some middle manager, chances are is that they will rope you into the official hiring process. Now it sounds like, this person contacted the HR org and got you into their process. So I suppose that could count for something. But if you were to go hire, you're talking to the hiring manager's boss or their boss's boss. You're talking to an executive. Usually what happens then is you would end up going down and meeting with them, doing an informational interview or something. At least if you want to take that approach, you can do that. That's usually very productive, because if you have a basic idea of how to do that, you can walk out of that meeting and they think you're awesome. They think like, wow, we need to get that person. They have the right attitude. They seem to have the right skills. We could certainly use someone with that kind of attitude. And the very fact that they're here doing this, that signals a lot of great things about you. Just the fact that you had the initiative to do this, that already elevates you above the crowd. That's how those people think, generally speaking. Okay. The problem with middle managers is that usually they're too busy, and it's not part of their job description to take unsolicited queries from outside the organization, queries from the public, right? They don't know how to handle that. That's not part of their job. So they just kind of go, talk to HR, Sometimes they'll, if you're pushing for an informational interview, then they may entertain you, but it's more likely that they'll just refer you to their internal people, just like any other departmental request. You get an email from someone, oh, this is like a hiring thing? Okay, you need to talk to the person in HR. I'm going to route it for you, right? They'll handle it that way. The way you would, the reason why you would more frequently talk to a middle manager is if you're just sending the sort of DM that says, I'm here, I'm great at solving this problem. If ever you need someone that can solve that problem for you, let me know because I'd love to work for you. That kind of thing. It doesn't require them to really do anything. It's just that you're sending that in the off chance that they happen to be hiring right now for that role. So if it's say you're an engineer and you're sending this message to the department head of engineering in some company, okay? They're a middle manager, and occasionally they hire engineers in that department, right? In which case, the department head of engineering, they are the hiring manager, right? So if you send that message to that person, the head of engineering, if they're not hiring, nothing happens, right? If they are hiring, that message just landed right in their lap because they have to hire an engineer. Now, you're a fully qualified engineer. You're saying, hey, I'm great at doing this. I know about your company. I know you guys do great work in this area. I'd love to work for you. If ever you're hiring, please let me know. I'd love to work for you. So they would say, hey, we have to find someone. Now, if this could get me out of sitting in rounds of job interviews, which I really don't have time for, it's not my job, this is a good thing. And you're reaching out to me, you have initiative. It's clear that you are at least somewhat interested in this actual company, or else you wouldn't be doing this. So yeah, come on down. Let's come to my office, or let's go grab a coffee and let's talk about it. There might be some potential. So, that's more of why you would talk to a middle manager, that sort of just simple DM. But if you're wanting to do informational interviews and stuff like that, executives are really where it's at, because first of all, they have more time on their hands than middle managers do. And secondly, it's actually officially part of their job to entertain unsolicited queries from the public, because this could be potential business partners. It could be, it could be somebody wanting to open a dialogue with your company, to maybe have some kind of strategic partnership, or it could be a supplier or a vendor or a distributor, or it could be a regulator. It could be anything really. So it's part of their job to sort of filter those and take those, right? So that's how you can get in. You get an informational interview. And if at the end of it, they have a very pleasant conversation with you, and they see like, wow, you know your stuff, and you're really passionate about doing this kind of work, and you're asking some very intelligent questions about this industry and like what's coming forward, all the stuff that I got to deal with, what's the impression you're going to make? The impression is they're going to be like, wow, we need someone like you. You seem to check all the boxes. Yes, we have to verify everything. We have to send you to HR and stuff. But like, it looks to me like, we really need people. You've got the right attitude and you seem to have the chops. So, you know what I mean? So then you get into a situation where the executive is contacting HR and saying, listen, bring this person in for an interview. Now that's very powerful. Not a lot of recruiters are going to tell the executive, nuts to you, we're not doing that. It's like, they sign your checks, I've had several of my students get hired because the CEO handed the director of HR that student's resume and said, look into this person, right? Like, after meeting the student, after doing an informational interview with the student contacted the CEO, said, like, I'd love to get your expert opinion on this. The CEO said, sure, come on down. I can certainly give you like 30 minutes or whatever. So the student went down, made a good impression, asked some intelligent questions, learned a lot, shook hands with the CEO, gave the CEO their resume, which I did not recommend, but they did it anyway. And the CEO handed that to the director of HR, and that resulted in the student getting hired at that company. And that happened a couple of times. And that, anyway. Okay, I got to get off this topic. What was this in response to? I've talked so long, I even forgot the original question here. Reached out to the hiring manager. They want to arrange an interview. I think I was just reacting to that. Hopefully it works out, Dave. And if nothing else, these kinds of interactions are really good, because the more of these kinds of interactions you have, I hope you go down there. I hope you do an informational interview or whatever you do. It's all good. The more you learn this stuff, the more it opens up opportunities for you. Incidentally, all this is covered in that course. If you're interested in learning, like, my recommendations for how to do this, you can do this. This is the great uncharted, secret of job search. It's really not a secret. It's an open secret. The only way it's a secret is because you don't hear recruiters talking about it very often. And that's because, in my opinion, recruiters have a conflict of interest. They're not going to tell you that you don't need to go through a recruiter to get a really good job. You know what I mean? They're not going to actively talk all about that, right? So that's why a lot of people that talk about job search, they're not talking about the hidden job market. You know what I mean? Or when they do, it's all about like really low level stuff. Like, try to talk to your former coworkers and see if they have positions open at other companies, right? Ash says, Bill, since you taught and worked with recruiters, do you think a bad/unprofessional recruiter, company's internal or HR, is indicative of how the company will treat you as an employee? Is that a red flag? I'd like to say yes, but no, unfortunately, because, look, it's yes some of the time and it's no some of the time. Now, what I have seen organizations that, their HR department is kind of borderline incompetent. But if you are getting a technical job, you work in the operations department or something, the operations department is run completely different to their recruitment and selection department. You know what I mean? So, like, they're two different branches of the company. The first job I ever got coming out of university, like many years ago, was with GE, General Electric. And at the time, they were this huge, sprawling multinational corporation with all these different divisions. And their HR department was like in a separate division or something from their, like the division that you were working in. Like, it wasn't just they were in a different department. They were in a different division, like GE was almost like a conglomerate. It had made light bulbs, it made plastics, it made jet engines, it made locomotives, it made appliances, and it provided financial services. It was like, this huge thing. And the HR department wasn't even in the division that you were working in, so it's like completely different cultures, completely like done in different locations, completely different. So the way they acted, their HR department behaved had no bearing on what the job was going to be like over in operations in some different division in a different location, So that was my experience with it, and I've seen that in other companies too since then, where there's a complete culture shift between their HR operation and, the various other departments or operations they have, As a general rule, it doesn't look good. It could be a red flag, but I wouldn't I wouldn't proceed on that. I would just sort of keep that in the back of your head. So if you get rejected, it's like, well, these people really came across like a bunch of idiots as a first impression. I just retain that, Now, if it's a small company, like we're talking like a 50-person company or something that's in one location in your hometown, and they've got maybe one HR person like on staff that does recruiting and benefits and, all that kind of stuff, conflict resolution, disputes, training, you know what I mean? They got one in-house HR person, but they all work in the same building, maybe like on 2 floors or all in the same office or something. Then it can be, there's much higher correlation between if this person is completely incompetent and out to lunch, then it suggests that other people in that organization that you will work with are kind of like that. Just notice how much in common the recruiter has with the hiring manager. That's a good start to see how diverse their culture is when it comes to this stuff. So anyway, that's completely anecdotal, but that's my opinion on it for what that's worth. You see all kinds. Ash says, context. I enjoyed meeting the hiring manager and team, and I accepted an offer, but the recruiter liaison throughout this process was shockingly awful. I would give the benefit of the doubt. Okay, it wouldn't be the first time we've seen this. Remember, a recruiter is an entry-level job, right? Hiring manager is, by virtue of its title, is not an entry-level job. You're presumably in charge of a team of people. So, you know what I mean? They could be a level above the recruiter. The recruiter could be just like a grunt. No offense to them, but that they're coming in as a worker at an entry-level job. They may be incompetent, or they may just be starting out. They don't understand you got to deal with people properly, 777E says, hi, during an interview, if you are a shy person, should you mention to them this fact? Listen, I don't think there's any harm in doing it, but personally I wouldn't. And the other thing is that, listen, 777E, okay, I get it. I truly do, okay? I'm a technical introvert. It's very intimidating, especially being at a job interview where you're talking to strangers, there's pressure on, you're out of your comfort zone, you're on somebody else's turf, playing by their rules, it doesn't exactly put you at ease. I get it. I totally get it, okay? But listen, here's how this works, okay? You might be a shy person now, okay? Fair enough. Fast forward 25 years. You might be running the place, okay? Or a similar place. Are you going to be that same shy person? No. You've learned the ropes. You've been around the block several times. You know where all the parking spaces are, figuratively, right? You're not going to be that shy person that's nervous to talk to strangers anymore, okay? You're going to have met so many strangers in so many different encounters over the course of your career. Some of them will be in job interviews, but a lot of them will be in other contexts. And after a while, you notice all the patterns. You realize that most job interviews are pretty much the same, the same thing they ask you. There's only a subset of, just a handful of things that they ask you. You know what I mean? Once you've heard it all, it loses its mystery and its intimidation factor. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what life is like. You develop that confidence, you develop those skills. Maybe they come a little bit later for you, these social skills, than they do for the average person. But you still get there, just the same as the average person. You may even surpass them because you're on a trajectory to learn this stuff actively as you get older. Most people, they learn them all in their teenage years and then just levels off, But you're a bit behind the game, but you keep going. You know what I mean? And So your goal should be, you're certainly not going to define yourself as a shy person, because that's not who you are. You're at the moment, you're a bit shy, but that's a temporary thing. It's not going to hold you back. And what you should do is you should learn everything you can and take advantage of every interaction that you're doing, to improve yourself, right? So go in there. Don't mention that you're shy. Just if you're like really shy and awkward, they'll probably be able to detect that without you having to say anything. Okay. Like not in a bad way, but it'll just like, okay, I can read this person. They're not like super extrovert. They're not super confident. At least it doesn't seem like that. And that's fine. Go in there, do your best. However you do, it'll be okay. And as time passes, with each encounter like this you'll get a tiny infinitesimal amount better. Okay? Okay, so the last thing you want to do is say to yourself, oh, I'm just a shy person. That's who I am. Because it's not. I mean, do I know? No. But do you know? No, you don't have a crystal ball. What tends to happen is people tend to lose that. In some way, shape, or form, it's going to diminish. Some people, it'll be a little bit. Some people will be a lot. And in some people, you get a tremendous transformation, right? So don't stress out about it. Just go in there, do your best. What really, really helps is doing mock interviews, okay? Practice interviews. So grab a friend or family member, okay? I've talked about this a lot. Maybe you've heard me say this. Grab a friend or family member, just someone that's some useless person that's, loafing around, they're annoying you. Say, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do these things called mock interviews. You're going to pretend to be a job interviewer, and I'm going to be the candidate. And we're going to do this. And this is going to be like a rehearsal for me. So you go and find some job interview questions, or I'll give you a list of questions. You ask me these questions. We're going to do this like it's the real thing. Okay. And like I say, for you, if this is a little bit awkward and nervous, that's good, because it's simulating what you might feel when you go to an actual interview. Now, if you can do 3 of these a day for 10 days, just with maybe different family members, different friends, whatever. You could even get a career coach, like, on the internet to do a mock interview with you over a live stream or something, or like a Zoom call, if you want to go to that length. So that's 3 interviews over 10 days. That's 30 interviews. You do 30 mock interviews. When you go down to this job interview, whenever it takes place, I don't know if you have 10 days, but whatever. In the future, when you go down to a job interview, you'll know the answers forwards, backwards. Like, you'll be so prepared for it. And you have been through this so many times that you're going to be so much more confident. You're going to be not nearly as shy. Okay. So, you know what I mean? If you do that, practice makes perfect. Nobody's instantly good at job interviews. You have to practice, just like anything else in life. It's like learning a musical instrument. Just practice and you will improve. It's just that simple. Okay, so I wish you the very best of luck, 777E. I was a shy person too a long time ago. I remember a big thing for me was whatever age I was. I was like late. I was in my 20s or something. I don't know. It's like, when you would be in these type of situations, I wouldn't look people in the eye. Like I got a camera staring at me here, so I'm like looking at the camera, right? But, just it clicked. When you talk to people, when they're talking to you, you're looking them in the eye, And, occasionally you glance away, you look at your watch, whatever, right? But you're looking them in the eye, right? The entire time. And it makes you feel a lot more confident about it. You feel like you can really speak to them and they're less intimidating. So just learning little things like that along the way, that'll help. Best of luck. Namarit says, in interviews, how to make organic talk. Most of the time we prepare and talk well. Interviewer thinks it's rhetoric. Okay, very simple, Namrit. Here's what you got to remember. It's not about telling people stuff all about you. Okay, that's not what it's about. It's about asking them questions. Okay, that's the first thing you got to remember. You want to make some chit chat? Ask them a question. Number 2, the question should be about something that they'd probably want to talk about. Okay? What do people like talking about? They like talking about themselves, right? How often do you get someone, like a friend or someone, coming up to you and saying, so, Namrit, what do you think about this? You know, and it's something that you care about, something like it's something you do, so you know a lot about it, and you've got strong opinions about it. Maybe it's a common thing. This, you know, like I don't know if you literally want to do this, but something like politics, you know, something in the news that everybody's talking about, something that person concerns themselves with all day long, either what they do on their job, or, you know, what do you think of your boss, or what do you think of this thing that you do, right? So you got to ask some questions, and you got to ask some questions about something that they'll probably talk about. They enjoy talking about it, and they know a lot about it. Okay, people love being asked for their opinion on lots of things, right? Because number one, it's very flattering. People feel flattered if they feel that you honestly are interested in their opinion. They find that very flattering, and they'll love you for like bringing that up. You know, how often do you get somebody saying, you know, hey, you know, Namrit, you know, what do you think of this? You know, and they're like genuinely interested to hear what you have to say. You know, it doesn't happen very often, but it's very flattering when it does. So that's that's like sort of a cornerstone of making chit chat with people. I haven't told this story in a while, but I told it several times on my channel, where I did informational interviews with a lot of CEOs and stuff years ago, people that I didn't know, but I contacted them on LinkedIn. I said, you know, I'd very much like to get your expert opinion on, you know, this industry. You know, could you spare me 30 minutes? And I did the most extreme case of that was I got the CEO, the person who was the CEO in charge of the international airport in my city at the time. I requested an informational interview with them, and they said, sure, come on down. I can give you 30 minutes. So I said, fair enough. So I showed up their office was in the control tower of the old control tower of our airport. So the big office, like the office is like the size of the floor plan of my house. Anyway, so I went down there, and my meeting was supposed to be half an hour. And I walked in, and the person's name, let's call them John. I said, hey, you know, John, you know, so how's business? That was the first thing I said to them. They said something like, hello, Bill, you know, come on in. And I said, oh, thanks, John, you know, blah, blah. So how's business? And they talked for 45 minutes straight, because that's what they deal with. That's what this person does all day. They run an airport. And so they obviously have some opinions on that. And they could obviously have a lot to say on that, you know, and they're flattered that someone's interested. So their assistant, you guys heard the story. So their executive assistant came in after like, I can't remember, it was like half an hour or something, and said like, you know, you got this other thing, you know, right? And the CEO waved them off. He said, no, I'm talking to Bill. So I ended up being in their office for an hour and a half, because they talked for 45 minutes and then got self-conscious and said, so what about you? What brings you here? You know? So anyway, ask some questions. That's how you make chit chat. That's how you get people to like you. That's how you learn. Okay. It's not about you telling them things about yourself. It's about you asking strategic questions, you know, just general questions about what you think they'll probably know about. If you're going to talk to a recruiter, you ask them a question about recruitment as it relates to them, you know, right? Do you get a lot of these types of people? Do you usually get this type of interview? You know, like that kind of stuff. And they'll probably be able to talk your ear off about it. Hopefully that helps. Femi Williams says, I want a long-term career, but I'm not a very skilled, experienced engineer. if I receive a job offer from a big company like Boeing and a small company with about 50 people, which should I take? Listen, Femi Williams, we don't have a crystal ball. None of us have a crystal ball in knowing. You'd love to know like how this is going to turn out and how that's going to turn out to make these decisions, right? It would be wonderful if we all had that. We don't. Now, look, for what it's worth, I can relate to some of what you're saying. I have a degree in engineering, and I worked for big companies, really big companies, in the first half of my career, and I worked for small companies in the second half of my career. Now, for me personally, I much preferred small companies. Once I went to a small company, I've never looked back. I've never gone back to big companies because maybe I've been fortunate, but it's a completely different dynamic. In big companies, you get more of what they call Theory X, where it's like workers are not trusted. Managers have to police them, stand over them, make sure they're working, whip them hard, right? They're not allowed to really do much other than what they're told to do. You can't take initiative. You can't work independently. And they don't want employees having initiative and authority. In fact, the entire structure of larger organizations is designed to keep the workers down, like stay in their lane. We don't want them getting above themselves. We don't want them taking initiative and initiating things on their own. No, we have to control all that. We have to decide who does what. In smaller companies, generally speaking, it works differently. Now, there are some bad smaller companies, but there's also a lot of good ones, depending on what industry you're in. I've had the pleasure of working with some very good ones, and usually it's been in business to business, right? So instead of business to consumer. And the reason for that is because when you only have like 20 people, 50 people, even 100 people in your company, you can't like stand over them and watch them do their entire job. You have to trust that, when your back is turned, because you got your own work to do, they're going to be off doing their job, right? So they get to act much more independently. They can take the initiative much more. They can make a lot of decisions more. It's just not possible to have a rule for everything in a small company or have policies that cover every situation. It's not like that. You have to rely on people to act more independently, use their own judgment, and not have every decision bottleneck through the managers. So completely different way of operating, completely different culture. And I also saw a lot of positive things in small companies. Where, for example, a small company, this is what opened my eyes, a small company that couldn't pay as much compensation as their larger competitor, who was a multinational corporation. But the small company retained all the best employees. Now, when I first arrived there, I was puzzled by this. And I couldn't figure it out. How does that happen? You guys can't pay as much, but you've got all these people that are extremely dedicated. And then I saw two things. I saw the boss go to a worker on late on a Friday afternoon when they were about to leave to go home for the weekend and say to the worker, listen, I'm sorry to do this, but I need you to stay. I need you to finish this job that you're working on right now. And then this was like a piece of equipment or whatever. I need you to go get in the truck, drive it to the customer site, install it. If that takes you all night, stay in a hotel, okay, like in this remote town or whatever, and then come back the next day, whatever it takes, just finish it. Let me know when you're done. And I need you to do that. Can you do that? And the employee said, sure, not a problem. And I was like, what? I'd never seen that before. I was used to like unionized environments. Everybody's disgruntled. Everybody's doing the bare minimum. No one would ever voluntarily do anything above and beyond. And, I was like, oh my God, you've got like the best employees. They're super dedicated. How does this work? And then I saw another employee, like a few days later or something, call in sick. And they said, I'm terribly sorry. I'm sick. I have to take a few days. I'll be off starting today. And the boss said, no problem. Take as much time as you need. Come back when you're ready. That also is like, really? I never seen that before either. Usually the boss gets upset. I need you to work. Come on in. If you don't come in, there will be consequences. That's what I was used to. Right? So it's like these people were treated like human beings. In exchange, they stayed working for slightly less money than they could make if they went across the street. And they were super dedicated because they had a lot of personal loyalty to their boss who like ran things, and it was like, wow, this is the way businesses should be run. Not only is it more effective as a business, but everyone's so much happier. You know what I mean? So from that moment on, there was no looking back for me. That's my personal experience. And that was working in an industry where you have a lot of money floating around because it's business to business being handled by only a few employees. So it's like the opposite of like a call center. Okay. So in that situation, that's what I saw. And that's formed my opinion. And I've been in that world ever since. So, but for example, something like Boeing, you could learn a lot in a place like Boeing. Maybe when you're young, it's good to like do that. It's something you can put on your resume. It's instantly recognizable, right? The small company, nobody's ever heard of them. The fact that you got them on the resume, it's almost as if you're like an entry-level employee because they've never heard of this company. You know what I mean? But you put something like Boeing or like any other big name, it's like that carries a lot more weight. Rightly or wrongly, it carries a lot more weight. So it's a judgment call. And everything I've told you right now is all anecdotal. So if I had to make a recommendation, I would say work with the big company simply because they're a more recognizable name to put on your resume. And you might learn a lot more upscale skills. Okay, where did I leave off here? So that was Femi Williams. Warren says, does an MBA still hold good value today? Of course it does. Business is the scientific study of how to make money. The gold standard educational credential in business is the master's degree in business. So that's called a master's of business administration. That's what an MBA is. So yes, it still holds a lot of currency. And I mean, on top of that, you're kind of talking to the wrong guy because, I mean, I have an MBA and I also have my own course for people that's the equivalent of an MBA. So I'm a little biased in that, but I mean, I'm being honest when I say that it does have value. It's like anybody who claims that, if you want to know, first of all, the big question is, does it make sense to learn how business works? That's the first question you got to ask yourself. If it doesn't make any sense for you to learn business and how business operates or any of the principles of business, then getting an MBA won't make any sense, right? But if the answer is yes, I should learn how business works and learn the business principles, then the question is, if I want to learn that, what's the best way? Well, the gold standard is to get an MBA. But there's a lot of morons talking about this. There's a lot of misinformation. They're like, oh, you don't need this. And that's based on the fact that, is the MBA the be all end all to know absolutely everything you could ever possibly need to know about business? No, it's the theory. It's like driving a car. Usually you have to take a written test. So it tests you on do you know what traffic signs mean and things like this, right? And what lane should you be driving, stuff like that. That's the written part. But then you've got to take the practical part where you get behind the wheel and you control the car, right? That's like experience in the business world, right? So to really drive, you need the written part and you need the practical part down. Anybody who tells you don't need to know any of the written stuff to drive a car, they're technically correct. You could get into a car, you could go 1,000,000 miles an hour. You don't know what lane you're supposed to be in. You don't know, what any of the street signs mean, or you don't know what a stop sign is. It's like, yeah, you could drive your car, but it's not going to end well. You're not going to be very successful at it. That's like business. If you don't know any of the theory, but you've shadowed somebody on the job and you've seen what they do and you just replicate it in a mature industry where nothing changes very quickly, you could get away with it. And they probably don't value education in that industry, right? And as long as nothing changes, you could get away with that. You don't really understand why you're doing what you're doing. You don't know any of the alternatives to doing, nor do you know if it's the ideal thing you should be doing. All you know is that it seems to sort of work and no one's complaining. The problem is that when all of a sudden the world moves on and doing that job that way no longer is effective. Maybe new competitors enter the market. Maybe there's a new technology. Maybe the regulations change, the laws change. But for whatever reason, this thing that you've always done, all of a sudden it stops working. Then what do? That's when you're screwed, because you don't know any of the theory. You don't know what would work, what would likely work in that situation, because you don't, and nor have you seen any other solutions. So the only thing you can do in that situation is trial and error. You ask around, oh, what are you doing? Oh, and someone says, I tried this and it didn't work. Okay, mental note, don't try that. You don't know what you're doing, right? And that's how some businesses operate. Some industries operate like that, where they don't place any value on education, but yet they're quite bad at what they do. And the first company to enter a market like that actually has some brains behind it, usually it's run by a bunch of, clean-shaven kids that run circles around all the other existing players because they actually know what they're doing, So it's a complicated thing. It's like saying, if you want to drive on the highways, do you really need to take a written driving test? Is that really necessary? You're going to get some people that say yes or no. The answer is you need both. That's what it comes down to. And if you don't believe me on any of this, I'll just ask you one question. Look at banks, look at people who traditionally get MBAs. Are they still hiring MBAs? Of course they are, right? So that would suggest that, yes, in today, you still need to know it. Darnell says, thank you. I'm glad I asked you. That's an interesting framework to look at orgs with. Okay, good. I'm glad you got something out of that. Yeah, we really went off on a tangent on that one. Femi Williams says, good point. I think so far I found working for big companies kills my creativity and there is much politics. I like the idea of working for a small company too. Thanks for your insight. Yeah, like they both have pros and cons. There is no one right answer. It's, do you want this or do you want that? It's like somebody saying, should I eat hot dogs for the rest of my life only, or should I eat caviar for the rest of my life only? Like there is no one right answer. Sometimes you're in the mood for hot dogs. Sometimes you're in the mood for caviar. They each have their pros and cons, right? It would be funny if you go out to a fancy restaurant, you're on a date or you're in an important business meeting and you go out to like a, $200 a plate fancy restaurant or something, and, they serve caviar and you've got to tell them, no, I'm sorry, I only eat hot dogs. You're going to have to come up with some $200 hot dogs, or we have to go somewhere else, That would be fun. And if they don't, then you get violent. Warren says, we all know the USA offers great opportunities for people in finance. Yes, we all know that, don't we? Especially back in 2008. Thank you, by the way. So are there any other countries who offer good opportunities for people in finance? Nope. The USA is the only place in the world where you can find a good finance job. Warren says, thanks for your insight on the MBA. You're absolutely welcome, Warren. Warren, what do you think? I don't know where you're coming from, but if all I have to go on is that little paragraph that you wrote, or that sentence, that seems to be a very xenophobic view of the world. You know, my understanding is like the EU, it's the same size or larger than the USA. They're the size of the economy and the number of people in it and the geographic location. That might have changed with Britain leaving it, but you know, for a start, they are the same size as the US. And then, of course, we're talking about China, you know, India, right? These places are not trivial. You know what I mean? They do a tremendous amount of banking in these places, right? So, yeah. And we're not gonna even touch Islamic finance in this live stream. You know, that's a whole other thing. Okay. Some people asked some really interesting things today. I see there's 36 people here. Check out my courses. If you're looking to get hired, this is where I put all my advice on that all in one place with templates and processes and everything. If you're wanting to learn about the hidden job market, you're wanting to learn how you can break in and unearth some of those opportunities, I put all that advice here. I don't really have any videos that talk about that stuff. I talk about the posted job market. I can put those into videos because you can break it up into like 5-minute little pieces, right? But the hidden job market, you really can't. It's like this monolithic thing, all these principles stacked on top of each other. And you have to understand them all to really have the whole thing make sense. So that's why I pretty much have that in that course. There's a link to it in the description box below. I've done FAQ videos on all these courses, these 3 courses I got on the screen. So you can learn all about the course, how it works, what it teaches you, to be all that to be as transparent as possible. There's accompanying videos for each course. Check those out if you're interested, if you want to learn that stuff with me. This is also a relatively pertinent course for people here. If you're trying to get promoted in a job or you're trying to break into management, this is useful. In my past life, in my past career, I worked my way up to be the CEO of a smaller company. And everything I learned about communication skills, I basically put into that course there. So if you're trying to climb the ladder, there's several things you have to tack on to your technical skills. One of those is people management skills. Another one is financial skills. Another one is communication skills, like advanced communication skills. This is the advanced communication skills component. So if you're interested in that, it's called Write Like a Professional, and it's about writing, but basically it's about what to say. That's the important part. So if you're interested in that, you want to take that with me, check out that course. There's a link in the description. I also talk about business. Business is my core competency. So I have that course. That course is designed for several people that are interested in learning business. But what I found was criminal and stupid was how a lot of schools are really being gatekeepers of this. They're charging you 5 figures to like learn this. And the irony is that the information that they're teaching, the knowledge they're teaching, has been out in the public domain for a very, very long time. So I find it very irresponsible and a bit of a kind of underhanded, unscrupulous thing where, you know, they're sort of sitting on this knowledge and saying, you know, it costs you this much to learn when it doesn't. It's like teaching grade 12 mathematics, 12th grade mathematics. Do you really need to pay someone $50,000 to learn 12th grade mathematics? No. It's out there in the public domain. You can order a book on Amazon, and then you could read it yourself, do all the problems, and you can learn 12th grade math. And you could sit down to write a standardized test, and you can ace it. You know what I mean? You don't need to pay exorbitant amounts of money to learn this stuff. Business is the same way. You know, you can order all the textbooks off Amazon for cheap. You can get, not the latest edition, but a couple editions in the past. Usually the only thing they change is the pictures and the case studies and not even the case studies usually. And it costs like $5, $10, that kind of thing. So what that course is, it's a reading list. I give you the reading list. You can order the books for cheap. and then you can read them in your spare time. And I have videos that guide you through it, but basically you're not learning it from me, you're learning it from the textbooks, and it's the same textbooks that they use in places like Harvard Business School in their MBA program, right? These are the textbooks that they're using in the top universities in the United States and in Canada and around the world. So, you know what I mean? You're getting the information right from its source, and you can do it on your own schedule. And you don't even have to do it all in depth. You could skim it if that's all you're interested in doing. So this is great for entrepreneurs. It's great for people that just want to, be more effective in their job and making business and management type decisions, and this kind of thing. So if that's one of your goals and you'd like to learn that with me for like literally 2% of the cost of what it would cost you to take it in university, check that out. There's a link in the description for that. Warren, so Femi Williams says, okay, Warren says, we all know USA, blah, blah. Thank you for, I'm from Canada. There aren't many opportunities for people in finance. Okay, well, these things are cyclical, aren't they? There's a boom bust kind of thing. And a lot of that stuff happens in the hidden job market too. When you're working in finance, depending where you're working, like for example, earlier today, I did a live stream about private equity. And, in private equity, yeah, a lot of people have a finance background, but it's more than just having a finance background. It's about your networking connections. It's about your industry experience. It's about your judgment when it comes to making good business decisions. About, certainly in private equity, it's about what companies to acquire and all this kind of stuff, like mergers and acquisitions. And that's depends on a lot more than just your education. You know what I mean? The way this stuff is done in practice, and I was actually talking about this today, is, you really need to know the ins and outs of that industry. And it may not be possible for the finance people to really learn enough about that to make sound decisions. That's why they put together, teams of advisors and things from those industries to assist them. And you have to combine all this knowledge together to make these decisions. You can't really keep it in one head. It's almost distributed, right? But the finance people are usually running the show, and that's why they need to have these sort of executive management skills to really make these decisions and wrangle all the people and resources you need. So it depends on more than just your education. It depends on your experience largely, and your ability to network and to draw on other resources reliably. So a lot of those jobs are consequently on the hidden job market. So, that's how that's somewhat how that stuff works. Anyway, thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. I will be back on Monday. I'm going to be live on Monday with another edition of Honest HR Nitrous. If you have questions, you can come back and ask. Until then, if you're trying to find a job, I wish you every luck. Remember to force yourself to do something fun this weekend. You got to take care of your mental health. It'll give you the endurance to really kick ass through the week on a job search campaign. Okay? You probably don't feel like it, but you got to force yourself to just do something fun, do something that you enjoy, and that will help you. It'll help you get longevity and have the resolve to go down this road, endure the rejection, endure the uncertainty. And I'm a resource if you have any questions. Thanks, everyone. You guys are awesome. Never forget that. And I will see you soon. Take care.